Good morning, Momentum. It is so good to be here with you. But here's the deal. I'm not going to give a talk this morning. I don't have fancy slides for you. This is not going to be a normal presentation. In fact, it's going to be different because I brought something with me I affectionately call my atheist glasses. So what that means, when these glasses go on, my worldview is going to change from Christian professor, part-time high school Bible teacher, to atheist. Then I'm going to briefly tell you my atheist story, which is actually the story of a friend of mine who is an atheist. And then I'm going to open it up to the entire audience, including up in the balcony, for questions or challenges you'd like to raise to an atheist. And then I'm going to do my best to respond, and then the last 20 minutes I'm going to take my glasses off and we're going to talk about what did we just learn from this experience. Now, are you guys ready for this? All right. That was less than convincing, but I'll take it. Now let's throw the lights on in the whole place if we can. That would be helpful. But let me give you a couple things to think of before we begin, okay? You can turn the house lights on, everything. Now, before we start, keep a couple things in mind. Number one, listen very carefully. If somebody comes in late, can you please tell them what we are doing? So I teach at a school, a Christian school, kind of like Indiana Wesleyan in Southern California called Biola University. And I went there as an undergrad, and what happened is we would have chapels with this many students, 2,000 or 3,000 students packed into our gym. And this fellow was a missionary to Muslims. So he starts off the chapel by saying, I'm a Christian, I'm a missionary to Muslims, but what I'm going to do is put on this kind of Middle Eastern looking garb, and I'm going to give an evangelistic presentation that a Muslim would give, open it up to the entire student body for questions. I was sitting there thinking, this is so interesting. Well, a student comes in late, not knowing what's going on. From the back of the gym in front of the entire student body, this student shouts out, "This is not the house of Allah. This is the house of the one true living God." Awkward silence. So don't be that guy, don't be that girl. If someone comes in late, let them know, psst, just role playing. Second, I'm not saying all atheists believe exactly as I do in character. Just like there's a huge variety of theological beliefs and attitudes amongst people who consider themselves Christians, there's a huge variety of atheists. There's existentialists, there's nihilists, there's postmodernists, there's secular humanists. There's a fellow who calls himself the friendly atheist. He's a nice guy. And then there's some atheists I know where the last adjective I would use is friendly, and everywhere in between. So I'm not saying all atheists answer as I do, but I will do my best to represent an atheist worldview. All right. So again, glasses go on. I'm going to take just a few minutes to tell my atheist story, which is the story of a friend of mine. And then we have, if you'll hold them up, I see one mic over there. Where's the other mic? Second one, and one up top. They'll walk around. They will find you. So if you just shoot your hand up, here's what I ask. Make your questions as brief as possible. If necessary, I'll let you follow up. But this is not a time to give a speech and impress all your friends. Think through your question, state it clearly, and then we can get as many questions in as possible. All right? That's the plan. Glasses go on. I'm going into atheist mode. Here we go. Good morning, Momentum. Thank you for having me at your event, especially given that I'm an atheist. I don't get invited to a lot of Christian events for reasons that probably don't surprise you. So even though this is a Christian university and I heard Momentum is like for Christians, can you tell me how many of you are Christians? Let me see your hands. Okay, all right, put your hands down. Looks like most, if not all of you. Well, I'm not a Christian. I grew up in a Christian home. I actually used to go to church. I used to read my Bible. I would pray. I even tithed like $2 to the little bank in Sunday school, because that's what I was told I was supposed to do to be a good Christian young man. I went to Christian conferences, not quite as cool as Momentum, but fun Christian conferences. I really believed it. But then I was about 14, 15 years old. How many of you are 14 or 15? Let me see your hands. Okay, quite a few of you. I was about your age. I had this friend, and we'd have debates about politics and culture. And one day, she asked me some questions about my beliefs I hadn't really thought about before. My first thought was, well, the Bible says. My second thought was what my pastor taught me. My third thought was what my parents said. And then, friends, my fourth thought changed the trajectory of my life. My fourth thought was, I have no idea. But I'm going to go read both sides and follow truth. And wherever truth leads, I'm going to follow it. To make a long story short, once I started actually reading the other side and looking at the evidence, I realized there's no scientific evidence that God even exists. There's no reason to think the Bible's true. I mean, it's full of far too many contradictions and errors and, frankly, immoral teachings like slavery and misogyny and genocide to come from a holy God. And then, frankly, I don't even think there's good evidence Jesus lived, let alone that he died and rose on the third day. And I became an atheist. Now, I'll be honest with you, it was tough at first because my family and my friends were disappointed. But over time, it was freeing to just follow truth wherever it leads. So, look, I look at it like this, then we'll open it up for questions or thoughts or challenges. So how many of you in class have studied in history or English class stories about the Greco-Roman gods like Zeus and Poseidon? You know these stories? Let me see your hands. Okay, good. Like I thought, almost all of you. Well, when the ancient Greeks couldn't explain something in the world, such as earthquakes, what would they say is the cause? The gods are angry. Or they couldn't explain something like rain, they said what? The gods are crying? No, gods don't cry. The goddesses were crying. Which would include Thor, by the way. Oh wait, time out, that's not an insult. See, Thor is a title, not a person. Whoever wields the hammer is Thor. In the comic books, the hammer is wielded by a woman, a goddess. Now put your hands up if you knew that. Okay, put your hands up high. Keep them up, keep them up. Look around at all the nerds. You stepped right into that, didn't you? So notice the thinking of the ancient Greeks. When they couldn't explain a natural phenomena like why the ground is moving, they would insert the gods when they lacked an explanation. It's called God of the gaps. But the problem is when you use God or the gods to explain something in the natural world, as science advances, the room where you place God gets filled. You see, where the Greeks placed God, now we know it's plate tectonics. Where they place rain, we now know it's the hydrological cycle. Look, the more we learn about science, the smaller and smaller is the room for God. Now, if you want to believe in God because it gives you meaning, gives you purpose, makes you feel good, that's fine. I have no problem if that works in your life. My problem is when people say they think it's actually true and then try to force their values upon the rest of us. That's where I say time out. If you're going to make a claim, you need to have some good reasons that it's true. By the way, just so you know, I'm actually open-minded. If you could give me evidence the Bible's true, that God exists, that Jesus rose from the grave, I'd be a Christian. I would love to believe it. I just can't commit intellectual suicide, adopt something on blind faith, when all the evidence points the other direction. Well, I could keep talking, but I think we'll have a much more interesting interaction if I just open it up for questions. So if you guys will start walking around, we'll go on this side. If you want to come over here, put your hand up high. We'll come to you. Even up top, we have one mic. You can see her moving up there with the mic. And we're going to go as fast as we can to as many questions as possible. Go ahead. We'll start here.
Would you maybe be able to explain the God that you don't believe in, like what you think we believe God is?
Well, normally what I do, instead of telling people, don't leave yet, remember, stay there with a mic, stay there, don't leave yet, in case she follows up. Normally when somebody asks me to explain what they believe, I would defer to that person to explain the God that you believe in. So I'm not going to be presumptuous as to assume what you believe in, especially because when I talk to Christians, they're all over the map. They can't agree on anything. The earth is billions of years old. The earth is 10,000 years old. Jesus is God. Jesus is Michael the archangel. Baptized with water. Baptized with dripping. Women can teach in the church. They can't teach in the church. So there's so much difference among Christians, I wouldn't even presume to know what you believe. Did you want to follow up, or is that?
Oh, I wasn't asking about what I believe. I was just asking what you don't, like what God you don't believe in. Because clearly you don't believe there's a God, but just what you think God is, why you wouldn't believe in him, and what his character would be if he was real.
Well, so there's a difference between why I do or don't believe in God and what his character would be like. Because Muslims believe in a very different character of God than it seems like most Christians believe in. I don't believe in that Jesus is God. I don't even think Jesus existed. I think it's a mythological story patterned after the dying and rising gods of the ancient Near East. For somebody that supposedly did the things Jesus did, the lack of historical evidence is just, it's stunning to me. Let's go over here to this side.
If you believe that humans evolved from apes, then why aren't there skulls from apes that are transitioning to apes into humans? Why don't we have fossils that are transitioning from one species or variations of one species into another species?
Okay, question. Did I say that I believe humans evolved from apes?
Then what do you believe?
Okay, did I say that humans evolved from apes?
No.
No. I don't know a single scientist alive today who believes that. Not one. Now, virtually all scientists believe in Darwinian evolution, but the idea that we evolved from apes is not a part of Darwinian evolution. Now, do you want to know what I think about how we got here? Let me ask this question first. Since you raised it, how many of you don't believe in Darwinian evolution? Let me see your hands. You don't believe in it. Put them up high if you don't believe in Darwinian evolution. Okay, looks like almost all of you. Now, I'm going to ask, are you ready? Raise your hand if you can define what Darwinian evolution is. I'm going to call on you. Put it up if you can give me a definition of what it is. Put it up high. Okay, wait a minute. Time out. So when I asked the question, how many of you believe in it, all of you raised your hand and said you don't. When I simply asked you to define it, maybe 10 or 12 hands out of a couple thousand can define it. Don't you think if you're not going to believe in something overwhelmingly supported by science, a part of consensus that virtually all scientists adopt, you should at least understand it? What if you asked me what I think about the Bible and I said, I haven't read it, I don't need to? What would you say? You'd say, okay, wait a minute. If you're going to reject the Bible, you should what? Read it first. Isn't that fair? The reason I believe in Darwinian evolution is because the evidence is absolutely overwhelming. Whether it's vestigial structures we have from other ancestors, such as the tail, or things like the appendix or molars, things we find in the fossil record like Java man, which is a common ancestor we shared with apes, although we don't come from apes. You look at biogeography, the distribution of organisms, you can see the development over change biogeographically. You can look at homology, the similarity of structures. You can look at DNA similarity. The evidence for evolution is pretty overwhelming, if you're willing to read it with an open mind. Let's go up top.
Hi, Mr. Atheist. Can I call you Mr. Atheist?
Sure, my name is Dr. Vaughn, but you can call me Mr. Atheist.
Dr. Vaughn, thank you so much for coming under these unusual circumstances. But I just had a question for you about something you said earlier. So you said that the Bible is full of contradictions, Christianity is full of contradictions, and I don't want to discredit that. I would just ask you, could you please show me where?
So let me follow up with one question first. Are you sure you want to go down this road?
I absolutely want to go down this road.
All right.
Because I would like you to back up your statements.
Okay. So, let's do this.
Yeah.
What we could do is we could take each book in the Bible and talk about the multiple contradictions all of the 66 books of the Bible have. But we'll start with Genesis, and then I'll show you one in the New Testament. Okay?
Sure.
So book of Genesis chapter 1. You guys tell me, you should know the story. What does God create first? Plants or human beings? What does he make first? Plants on day 3, human beings on day 6. So notice the pattern, plants and then humans, plants and then humans. Now, if you skip over to Genesis chapter 2, verse 5, it says, when no bush of the field was yet in the land, and no small plant of the field had yet sprung up. At this stage, how many plants and bushes and trees are there? None. You look in the original Hebrew, it means not a single one, none whatsoever. So no bush of the field, no plants, no trees. Verse 7, then the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living creature. Now, did you notice something odd here? Genesis 1, God makes plants, and then he makes human beings. Genesis 2, he makes human beings when there are no plants. Now, you can't have both. This is why most scholars who aren't already blindly committed to the Bible actually recognize that there was a different author for Genesis 1 and a different author for Genesis 2. It's called the documentary hypothesis. We know the same author didn't write it. It's a clear contradiction. Now, let me give you one in the New Testament. So, for example, what day did Jesus die on? What day? He died on Friday because you call it Good Friday. How many days and nights was Jesus in the tomb? 3 days and 3 nights, according to Matthew. Now, what day did he raise? Sunday morning, while it was still dark, they went to the tomb and found it empty. Now, Friday afternoon to Sunday morning is not 3 days, and it's certainly not 3 nights. At best, it's 2 nights, 1 full day. Now, I'm just getting going. Now, dying on Thursday doesn't solve it. It actually raises more problems textually. So these are the kinds of examples, if you just read the Bible clearly, it's filled with contradictions. Look, the end of 1 Samuel, the beginning of 2 Samuel gives 2 different accounts of how Saul died. Read Matthew and read Luke, 2 different accounts about how Judas died. On and on and on, the Bible contradicts within. Now, I'm going to stop because I don't want to take more time. Is that sufficient to answer your question about contradictions in the Bible?
Yes, I think you thoroughly answered yourself.
Okay, good. All right, let's go back down to this side.
Oh, sorry. Oh, can I go?
Where's the
Hi.
mic? Is this God? Because I can't see. Okay, if it was, I'd listen. But as always, there's a natural explanation. A microphone in the back. Go ahead.
Hi, my question for you is, where does your standard of morality come from?
Oh, my standard of morality comes from well, let me tell you where it doesn't come from, then I'll tell you where it does come from. It certainly doesn't come from the Bible. And you know what? I'm doubting yours does too. The Bible says slavery's okay. It says women shouldn't speak in the church. It's okay with genocide. Like, clearly I don't get morality from the Bible. And I'm thankful that you really don't either. I get my morality from common sense. There's something called the golden rule. You say, gotcha. Look, there was a writer named C.S. Lewis. I'm sure many of you are familiar with him. I've read his works. He has a book called The Abolition of Man. And he shows in the back of this book the ancient Greeks, ancient Mesopotamians, ancient Hindu, ancient Chinese, Mesoamerica. There's a common moral principle of just treat people the way you want to be treated. Now, he says it comes from God. That's where we disagree. I think it's been wired into us by evolution. Because if we don't have a sense of morality and empathy, we can't survive as a people group. If there's not trust, if there's not honesty, if there's not telling the truth, we would wipe ourselves out as a people group. So you and I agree there's morality. You think it comes from the Bible, which raises a whole host of problems. I think it's been wired into us by evolution, and morality is just common sense. We don't need God to tell us about morality. That's why we see it in so many different cultures. Did you want to follow up?
So, yeah, what's the point of doing that then? Do you have a reward, a consequence? What's the point of following that out? Like, I see you don't. Yeah.
So here is why I think atheism is more moral than Christianity. If you're an atheist and you're moral, you are more moral than a Christian. Because you say, what's the point? And the answer is because God wants me to, because there's an afterlife. So you have to do moral things for some reward or greater reason. I simply say do moral things because it's the right thing to do. And that's the way you would want people to treat you. So I don't think we have to have a higher morality. In fact, that means you're not really loving your neighbor because you're supposed to do it, but because God's watching you to get brownie points. Atheists who say just do it because it's the right thing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This side.
Okay, so you brought up a book by C.S. Lewis, but C.S. Lewis also has a book called Mere Christianity, which pretty much points to the existence of God. That was my first point. My second point is, you said you didn't believe in that Jesus Christ walked the earth. When a man named Ron Wyatt discovered...
A man named who?
Ron Wyatt. He is an archaeologist that has passed away.
Ron White?
Wyatt?
Wyatt?
Yes.
Okay. Keep going.
Okay, so what he did was, he was an archaeologist, and he discovered what he believes to be the Ark of the Covenant. And in the Bible, it says that when Jesus was crucified on the cross, that an earthquake split the rocks beneath him. And after he died, a Roman stabbed the side of him, and his blood dripped out of his body. When Ron Wyatt found the Ark of the Covenant, there was a spot on it that...
Okay, let me stop you, because this is going really long,
yeah,
okay?
I realize that.
So first off, C.S. Lewis didn't prove that there's a God.
No.
If you read the first 5 books of Mere Christianity, he talks about morality pointing towards God. I already disproved that and said you can be moral without believing in God, which takes the legs or the rugs out from his entire book. Second, nobody has found the Ark of the Covenant. Nobody can document the existence of the Ark of the Covenant. There's a lot of stories on the internet. There's unknown supposed archaeologists like Rob Wyatt or whoever this guy is. He has not found the Ark of the Covenant. Now, if he did, this would prove nothing about Jesus. The Jews believe in the Ark of the Covenant. Muslims believe in the Ark of the Covenant. It doesn't tell us any of the stories were true, even if they did find it and they haven't. It would just say, here's some old relic that they used. That's at best all that it would prove.
Well, when they
so you're trying, which is good, but you're going to have to do a little better than some unknown archaeologist without a source that has not been substantiated. They do not have the Ark of the Covenant. I guarantee that 100%. In fact, read the most recent Biblical Archaeological Review, and they talk about different theories about the Ark of the Covenant. Why would the leading archaeologists talk about that if they've supposedly found it? The answer is they haven't. Good try. Let's go up top.
Hello.
Hi.
Good morning. Alrighty, so I got a good question for you. So you said earlier that Christians aren't really connected, but what is this? Like, do you see all these people
Okay,
here?
shh. I never said Christians aren't connected.
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
I take notes, I promise.
You misheard me. I never said Christians aren't connected.
I take notes, lots and lots of notes.
I don't care if Christians are connected. Muslims are connected, Jews are connected, Mormons are connected. I have no interest in whether they're connected or not.
But so what you were saying is earlier that we just all have different beliefs and we're unorganized and not connected. But like, do you see this? There's all these people from across the country. We had people ride their bikes here just to come spend the week with us and to learn about our God.
Okay, let me slow you down a little bit. I agree that there's a couple thousand people who probably hold some common views about God and are here connected. I have no problem with that. That wasn't my point. My point was when you look at Christianity as a whole, you've got Greek Orthodox, you've got Catholics, you've got Presbyterians, you've got Calvary Chapel, you've got EV Free. There's so many different denominations that differ over women in the church, age of the earth, whether we predestined, on and on, so many issues, whether same-sex marriage is okay. There's disagreement on all of these. My point is not that people can't ride their bikes to an event and be together. That doesn't matter to me. There's no theological continuity across different denominations. That's all I was saying. Let's go back over here.
So you believe that nothing or something came from nothing?
Did I say that?
I'm asking you.
Oh, okay. Yes, I do.
So you believe that you can throw a bunch of Legos in the air and create a castle?
No, I don't believe that.
So how can something come from nothing?
Okay, time out. If you're laughing, you don't understand his question. Something from nothing is the origin of the universe itself. If you throw Legos, you already have something such as Legos, and its supposed organization into a house or a plane is how you take something that already exists and build a pattern into it. Those are totally distinct questions.
So, the evidence, the whole universe is way too complex to be created by non-intelligence.
Okay, that's an assertion that you haven't backed up. I don't think that's true. The vast majority of the universe is inhospitable to life. Most galaxies don't support life. Most planets in our solar system don't support life. Most of the universe is not fine-tuned. There's some small pockets that are, but as a whole, it's actually the minority of places that seem to have some kind of design, and that can easily be explained by what's called extrapolating our probabilistic resources. Mathematically, it explains why there would be some pockets. If God exists, why would it be so few and far between? That's my question.
You have a question, actually? Repeat the question.
No, we're good. Let's go over here. Thank you for asking that. You got to get right to the heart of the question. Go.
Do you believe in the Big Bang?
Of course I do.
So do you believe that the Big Bang was an explosion?
No.
What do you believe that it was?
Okay, how many of you don't believe in the Big Bang? Let me see your hands. You don't believe in it. How many of you believe in the Big Bang? Okay, how many of you are never voting again after the last election? Okay, all right. Just checking. The Big Bang is a pejorative term coined by an agnostic scientist by the name of Frederick Hoyle in the middle part of the 20th century to describe the beginning of the universe as we know it. That's all it is.
So if something came from nothing, how would that something come to be? There's nothing to create it. There's nothing to come into being.
Okay, so if you're asking where the universe came from, we know it didn't come from God. We know it didn't come from God, because if you say God made the universe, you have an obvious problem. Who made God? If you say God caused the universe, now you need an explanation for God, and we're back to the God of the gaps. So God is a filler, so to speak, for a natural explanation. But it turns out we do have a natural explanation. Newton was right on a larger level about his basic laws of force and reaction and matter affecting other matter. But what he didn't understand on the small level is something called quantum mechanics, where uncaused things happen regularly. We see protons coming into existence, or electrons, and going out of existence. So we actually see something coming into existence without a cause regularly. So why would I say the universe needs God when we see this happening empirically, and inserting God raises the further problem of who made God?
But the Bible states that God was before time and that he has always been and always will be.
So here's the problem. This is an assertion for which there's not a shred of evidence. Even if that was true, Muslims believe that, Jews believe that. This is what we call something that's ad hoc, that just is supposedly trying to explain a problem that we have, where there's no independent evidence for it being true. By the way, if the universe can just exist, if God can exist without a cause, then why can't the universe?
Because God is all powerful. The universe was nothing.
Well, so now you're assuming that God exists. That's the very thing you have to approve, not just assert. And when we see from quantum mechanics things coming into existence without a cause, God is what we call superfluous, something that you just add on top of where the evidence points. Let's go up top.
So, you mentioned that the Christian God is a God of the gaps. What gaps is the Christian God fulfilling that other gods in the Judea region might not have fulfilled?
None.
Then why does it exist?
Well, there's a ton of religions that exist. I think it is kind of part of human nature that's evolved, where we want to explain things. Look, if you can believe in a god or a gods, and you have some kind of afterlife, then that gives group cohesiveness, gives you purpose. It helps a group survive and fight for bigger causes. There's an evolutionary reason why people invent a god or a gods almost universally throughout mankind, whether it's Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Mormonism, you name it. You should read Pascal Boyer's book, where he talks about the invention of religion. Back down to this side.
Okay.
Hold on, we'll come to you.
Should I stand up?
If you want to.
Okay, so I'm not going to try and argue with you because you obviously know your stuff. But like, so Christians like believe in like souls and like that, you know, our souls go to heaven and that we're like each individually made like differently, and that comes from God, and that's a supernatural thing that you can't see. You can't see our souls.
Yep.
What is your view on where souls come from, since that's not something natural? It's not like a natural being.
That's a great question. Here's my answer. I don't need to explain where souls come from because there is no such thing as a soul. There's no scientific evidence for a soul. We know the soul is not the seat of, say, personality. Why? Because when people get brain damage, what can happen? Their personalities change. I don't believe in such a thing as a soul. There's no evidence that the soul is real, so I don't find any need to explain the existence of the soul. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, good. Let's go over here.
There are some atheists in my school, and you say that Christians can't agree on what their beliefs are. But other atheists say that the devil is real. There are other ones that say the devil is not real. And there are some that say Jesus walked earth but did not rise. You say Jesus did not walk the earth at all. So you're calling us undecided, but why are you being a hypocrite calling us undecided when you are undecided?
Son, you need to be a lawyer someday. Okay, so listen very carefully. There is not a single atheist on the planet who believes Satan is real. Not one. Now, if one says they believe in Satan and they're an atheist, they're not an atheist, because Satan, by definition, is a supernatural being. Now, there might be some confused people in high school who think they're atheists, but that's not what an atheist is, okay? Second, here's the difference between you and between me. Christians positively assert that God exists, the Bible's true, Jesus is God, etc. So you are making a positive claim about the world. I'm not doing the same thing as an atheist. All an atheist is someone who lacks belief in God. So an atheist is not someone who says God doesn't exist. Think of if something is amoral, what does it mean? It doesn't mean it's immoral that does something wrong. Amoral means it lacks a sense of morality. This carpet is amoral. An atheist is one who simply lacks belief in God. That's why the charge of inconsistency might apply to Christians who make positive assertions, but doesn't apply to someone like myself who's simply observing and has no belief about God. So it's a good try, but it went over my head and hit someone else behind me. But go ahead and follow up if you want to. You don't want to, you're good. Okay. All right, up top.
Up here. Okay. So a quote from Charles Darwin, and I'd like to have your opinion on it. The horrid doubt always arises whether the convictions of man's mind, which has been developed from the mind of lower animals, are of any value or at all trustworthy. Would anyone trust the conviction of a monkey's mind if there are convictions of such a mind?
You want to know what I think about it?
Yeah, because with new atheists, I feel that they place enormous trust in their own powers of reason, but their atheist worldview undermines any basis for such confidence. And to give full credit where credit was due, this is from More Than a Carpenter by Josh and Sean McDowell.
So listen, here's the deal. There's some really smart Christians and some that aren't smart. That's a good source, just so you know. Okay, so here's my answer. One thing that is important for academics to remember is to speak in the area of their expertise. Okay, so if you're a chemist, you're an expert at chemistry, but not necessarily psychology. If you study sociology, you can speak with confidence in sociology, but when you start speaking about medicine, you're outside of your expertise. Darwin was a first-rate scientist, arguably one of the greatest scientists of the 20th century. Darwin was not a philosopher. He was not a philosopher. When he started drawing philosophical conclusions, he was outside his realm of expertise. So this is an area where he makes a statement. Clearly, he didn't really believe it because he wrote books trusting his reasoning and felt the evidence for evolution was very compelling. So it's interesting he said that. I see why Christian apologists would try to use that, but I'm not sure what it proves. Especially when we look at reason and science, what do we have? We have communication. I mean, the phone that's in your pocket, that came from science. Transportation, that came from science. How about things like health? That came from science. What has religion brought? Bloodshed, bigotry, and homophobia. So I don't see why that would disprove atheism at all, let alone evolution. Am I missing something?
No, thank you.
Okay, all right. Back to this side.
Right here.
Oh.
Jojo here. I just want to ask you.
Okay, keep going. They love you.
You say you only believe in something if it's like people can have like a real explanation about it, right?
I didn't say it like that. I believe in things for which there is evidence. And there's no evidence for God or the Bible.
So like, you know how scientists believe that the earth was made from like atoms and like moving really fast and clashing together, right?
It's not quite that simple. There's much more to it, but for the sake of discussion, assume I say yes.
Okay, so like, if nothing existed, what made the atoms move? Because like, who made the atoms?
Okay, so we've kind of already answered this question when we talked about quantum mechanics, where we see matter at the micro level, at the atomic level, coming into existence uncaused. We can actually observe this happening. So we know it's not God, because that raised the question, who made God? Or what caused God? Okay, so if you look in the universe, have you ever read the book The Grand Design by Stephen Hawking?
No, I have not.
So he's one of the leading physicists of our day. Well, you just boo atheists? That's kind of messed up. Stephen Hawking's a pretty smart guy, especially he's a handicap atheist. That makes it worse. I'm just saying that's pretty bigoted, but that's fine. In his book, The Grand Design, he actually shows how the laws of physics can explain the organization of matter, the organization of planets. So we don't need a God to do it. There's certain laws that exist, like gravity, etc., that are sufficient explanations. You should read it. Let's go over here. You look like you're good. Up front.
Hi, based on your beliefs, what do you believe happens when we die?
Okay, so good question. Now, I think you know what I believe about this. You look pretty smart. So I said I don't believe in a soul. I think you're just a body. I'm assuming you believe death is when your body and your soul separate. Your body ceases functioning, your soul goes to face judgment, whatever. Well, I don't believe in a soul. So when your body stops functioning, that's it. Life is over. Does that answer your question? Is that fair?
Yes. So based on your beliefs, what would your purpose for life be?
Also, that's a good question. It depends on what we mean by purpose. So if you mean like capital P purpose, so if you ask what's the purpose of, say, that guitar, it has purpose because someone made that guitar. There's a mind behind it. Well, I don't believe there's a mind behind the universe. There's no cosmic purpose, but that doesn't mean there aren't significant purposes while we're here. Things like freedom, human rights, enjoying life, passing on, having other kids, education, fun competition. There's a lot of things in life that have value even if there's no God. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
All right, let's go up top. We got time for maybe 2 or 3 more.
Hi, over here. Hey. How can you explain that, like, cosmos as evidence, biological, mental, and moral evidence without one explanation not conflicting with another, without one true answer and origin of everything leading to God?
Okay, slow down. Slow down. You can't explain the physical, biological, moral, all these different things because they each require independent, appropriate explanations. So how you explain something in history is different than how you explain something in, say, psychology. Psychology is different than law. Law is different than, say, biology. So why don't you ask me one particular question rather than the whole gamut, and I'll do my best.
Okay, but just leading up to that, how would you conflict all of that within everyday life? Because different people have different jobs, and they work on those jobs, and all of us connect together to go to people for different jobs.
I have no problem that people have different jobs and people work together in a country. That's human life. People have different jobs because through the process of evolution, we have evolved to bring different functions and cohesiveness for people group to survive. There's a good evolutionary explanation for that. Let's go over here. Who's got the mic? Don't look at me. I don't have a mic. Hold up money and they'll come to you.
Okay. So one of the most commonly used evidences of evolution. Well, here, for everyone, raise your hand if.
Okay, ask your question quickly, right to the point. Go.
Raise your hand if in your science textbook there is the example of peppered moths used for
Okay,
evolution.
let me stop you. I don't believe in peppered moths. Bad example. What question do you have for me?
List one visible evidence of evolution happening today.
Okay, so this is what's called a straw man, where you say, give me evidence here to support something, when the very theory itself doesn't imply that such a thing would be seen. So the evidence for evolution is not from saying, look, we can see a monkey turn into a human being, or an ape, as somebody asked earlier. Nobody suspects that. Because evolution is a long, extended process that takes hundreds of millions of years, so we wouldn't expect to see such a thing. That's called a straw man. Now, the evidence for evolution, which I listed earlier, from homology, biogeography, vestigial structures, embryological development, DNA similarity, the evidence for evolution is overwhelming, but not the specific kind you're looking for, because nobody posits that. Good try. Let's go over here.
So I just thought that for all the people in this room who are not being treated fairly by your intellectual dishonesty, no offense or anything.
Well, okay, time out. One thing I've learned is when somebody says no offense, that's a way of lightening the fact that they just offended somebody.
That's fair enough.
So he calls me a liar, and all of you are clapping that he calls me a liar.
That's an exaggeration.
Okay, just checking.
Okay.
And you're clapping that he called me a liar? I'm really confused.
So just to clarify on the subject of quantum fluctuations and quantum mechanics, quantum fluctuations are not nothing. By definition, it is a fluctuating sea of energy. So for an
No, that's
atheist,
false. That's false.
For an atheist,
That is false. Okay, that is not true in the world of physics. Now, there are some fluctuations of existing quantum particles, and we have the emergence of new particles. You see both in quantum physics.
That's correct, but there you go. These existence of new particles, they're not nothing. It's a sea of fluctuating energy.
Okay,
to reiterate
time out.
what I just said.
You started by calling me dishonest. I corrected you. You ceded that you were not representing the facts. Who's being dishonest here?
I don't see how I ceded to any facts.
You just conceded that quantum fluctuations involve the changing of particles and the emergence of new ones. So I don't have conversations with people who call me dishonest. Let's go up top.
Hi.
Hi. Last question. This is it.
I just want to like trace it back to like nothingness before you said nothing turns into something. Wouldn't it just be like my word against yours if there's no evidence behind anything?
No, there is evidence. We have and can observe quantum particles coming into existence. What evidence do you have for God? This is not an authoritative claim. This is known in the world of physics. Read The Grand Design by Stephen Hawking. Read A World from Nothing by Lawrence Krauss.
But where did the something come from? You know?
That's the whole point. Look, let me end with this, okay? The sooner you realize this, the better understanding you will have. Our common sense intuitions do not always match up with reality. I understand your intuition, like something from nothing, this is weird, but realize if you have taken a physics class, if you haven't taken a physics class, what percentage of this would you say is solid? You say it's solid all the way through. But if you've taken a physics class, what do you learn? This podium is almost entirely empty space. Now that's not common sense. You look out at the sun, what does it look like? The sun rises and sun sets. I can see it, it's obvious. But when we study physics and cosmology, we realize it's the sun that's stationary and we are moving. The same is true with quantum mechanics. I get that it feels non-intuitive, but we can observe it, but we can't observe God. Good question. Atheist is gone. He's gone. He's out of here. Now, I'm not sure if they're clapping for me or clapping that the atheist is gone. I'm not sure about that. Okay, ready, here's the deal. Take a deep breath, go. Now again, take a deep breath. Now I need it to be quiet because we only have a few minutes. Realize something first. I don't believe almost anything I just said in character. I don't believe almost any of it, okay? I'm a Christian, not because of blind faith, not because my parents were just Christians, not because it makes me feel good. I'm a Christian, and I think you should be a Christian only for one reason. If Christianity is true. If Christianity is not true, even Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, if they have the body of Jesus and he didn't raise, Christianity is false. I'm a Christian because I think Christianity is true, and I think it best explains morality, origin of the universe, the existence of the soul, historical Jesus. I'm a Christian because I think it's true. So I want to emphasize that because I want you to take a deep breath because I don't want you to wake up at midnight at Momentum and think, you know what, that atheist made sense. I think I'll become an atheist at Momentum. I would never get invited back. But before we go any further, here's a question I have for you. I want you to think to yourself, as a whole, how did you treat the atheist? Okay, I heard rude, bad, someone said hostile. Now, I don't have time to pass the microphone around, but I want you to listen very carefully. Friends, I have done this in youth groups of 10 students. I've done it in groups this side. I did it in a stadium with 6,000 students. Consistently, this was pretty mainstream, just so you know, this is the typical response I get, okay? Typically when I ask for words, people will say hostile, aggressive, defensive, angry. There might be some that were nice. That's the typical response. Now you might be saying, but you were pushing buttons and you were being rude. Of course I was. But the character I was playing was an atheist. I'm not saying all atheists are that way. I know some atheists that are more gracious and thoughtful than some of my Christian friends. But as Christians, we are called to a different standard than atheists are called to, right? Right? So, A few summers ago, I was speaking in Duluth, Minnesota. 6,000 students. I turned around to start my atheist role play. I had an atheist hat. I put it on. This group of students go, boo, boo, go home, Mr. Atheist. A youth pastor shouts out, you're going to hell. Like he shouts out at me. And I went, whoa, wait a minute. Here I am invited as an atheist to speak. Is that the loving thing to do? Didn't Jesus say, love your enemies? Wasn't he a friend of sinners? Didn't Paul in your Bible say, if you speak in tongues and you speak words of prophecy but have not love, you have nothing? I laid into these students and the whole stadium was silent, which proves there's a God because junior highers were present. And I have one so I can pick on them, and I love them to death. So the next summer I went to speak in Salt Lake City, about 500-600 students. I turn around to start my atheist role play, and the students in the front go, woo-hoo-hoo, we love you, Mr. Atheist, and that like doesn't normally happen. I went to them afterwards. I said, why were you cheering for the atheists? They said, well, we were part of the group that booed you in Minnesota. You know what my next thought was? They got the point. Friends, please hear me. I studied communications as an undergrad, and essentially they would say there's two components of communication. There's the content or the truth or the message, and then there's the medium or the means by which you communicate that message. Medium and the message. You know what's interesting about Jesus? Jesus came in grace, the relationship, and he came in truth, the content. He had both. Jesus spoke truth, but he did it not to win an argument, not to sound smart, not to prove somebody wrong. He did it because Jesus knew it was only the truth that would set people free. See, there's a temptation today to do one of two things. Either say, I'm going to speak truth. I'm going to show I'm right. I just speak truth. I'm God's prophet. I don't care how it affects you. And the other side says, well, I'm just going to kind of compromise truth because I think it's loving to never be judgmental and intolerant. Friends, both of those are a mistake. Jesus spoke truth, but he did it with a heart of love and compassion to set people free. We can't do any differently than that. So a few summers ago, I was speaking at a student conference all week, like 10 or 12 times, and I kicked it off by doing my atheist role play. And these students were the most testy, aggressive group I ever remember. And this girl was like back kind of middle to the left. She stands up, she goes, Mister, I want to read you something. I said, okay, what do you want to read me? She said, it's from the Bible, the Holy Word of God. I said, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in the Bible. She goes, I don't care. Listen up. She's going to be a good parent. I said, okay. She reads to me Psalms 14:1. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. I said, so you're publicly calling me a fool. She goes, Mister, you're a fool. Her friends stand up, go, woo-hoo-hoo. They're like giving her five, and they're like, got you, fool, pointing at each other and cheering. So I finished up my talk, but I was done. Like students surround me. All of a sudden, they had a lot of questions about things. And this girl waited till everybody was gone. She was going to be a junior in high school, so must have been about 16 years old. She leaned in and kind of looked to make sure no one was looking. She goes, I want to thank you for doing your best to defend atheism. I said, sure, why are you thanking me? She goes, well, I'm an atheist. I said, really? You're here at a Christian camp, how'd you get here? She said, well, I am a leader in my youth group. I said, I feel like I'm missing something. She said, I've grown up in the church, I've gone to conferences, I've gone to camp, and I just believed it. But recently I had some questions I didn't find answers to. My youth pastor parents said, well, don't ask questions, just have faith, just believe. She said, I started to realize I don't even believe this is true. I said, well, have you told this with anybody else? She said, no, you're the first person. I said, why haven't you shared with someone? And I'll never forget what she said. She said, because I'm afraid they'll treat me like they just treated you. I'll never forget that. Since that time, it's like God has begun to open up my eyes to realize the stories we tell, the jokes we laugh at, the misconceptions and stereotypes we often have of other people communicates by our relationships and our attitudes in a way that people don't even hear what we think is true. Now, I realize I had a condescending attitude as an atheist. I realize I'm trained in this and you're not, and I'm probably twice your age, more so for some of you. Fine. I was setting this up a little bit because here's one thing that I know. And you see this in great movies. And by great movies, I mean movies like the original Karate Kid. Like cinematic greatness. Daniel's son has to get a little bit humbled and so-called beat up a few times before he's willing to listen and he's actually ready to learn. Now, the point of this was not to beat you up, but to push back a little bit, rock you, get you thinking to say, wait a minute, do I really know why I think Jesus rose from the grave? What do I really believe about evolution and why? What is the soul? Is there evidence for the soul? What about the origin of the universe? Friends, these are big questions. These are huge questions. And what I know is if you want God to use you in your life, you need to have some answers to these questions. Now, I wrote a book called Is God Just a Human Invention? Where almost every question that you brought up, there's a chapter on evidence for the soul, there's a chapter on the origin of the universe, there's a chapter on evolution. Almost all the questions you ask, I put responses in there to help thoughtful Christians know what they believe and why. Well, I wrote it mainly for Christians, and Christians were reading it. I thought I'd love to get skeptics and atheists to read it. So I called up the largest atheist free-thinking group in Southern California where I live, called the guy, and I said, hey, I'm willing to come up to your group. I'll bring a signed free book for everybody and just sit in the hot seat, and you can ask me whatever question you'd like to ask a Christian for a couple hours. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds like a lot of fun to me. It's not because I think I have all the answers. You hang out with me, I will frequently say, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to go find it. Good question. I'm not afraid to say I don't know the answer to something, but that wasn't my goal. So my wife and my pastor and I went up to this atheist group for the day, sat in the hot seat. They fired questions at me for an hour and a half. At the end, I said, could I ask you some questions? Now, I could have asked them, how do you get something from nothing? By the way, you were right about quantum mechanics, all right? I just had to pick on you and change the subject because I had the microphone. You're on the right track. There is no proof something can come from nothing, okay? That is metaphysically absurd. See, when you mean nothing, you mean no thing. We don't mean when you look in the refrigerator and you go, oh, Mom, there's nothing in here. Well, there's something in there, not what you want. I could have asked him how you get something from nothing. By the way, just for the record, I do believe in the Big Bang. I just know who banged it. You can't get a Big Bang without a Big Banger. I'm just saying, that's all some of you are going to remember from this session. Friends, do you realize, shh, come back with me. Do you know of all ancient books that explain the origin of the universe, it's the Bible that says in the beginning. Amazingly, the scientific confirmation that the universe had a beginning matches what Moses wrote over 3,000 years ago. I could have asked about that. I could have asked him, how do you get morality without God? Now, please hear me. Please hear me. Atheists can be moral. Atheists can know right from wrong. Why? Because even atheists who don't believe in God are still made in the image of the very God that they reject. The interesting question is not, can you know right and wrong? The question is, on an atheist worldview, which there's no purpose to the universe, how is there objective right and wrong? And I think Fyodor Dostoevsky in his book, The Brothers Karamazov, was right. He said, if there is no God, everything is permissible. He's right. I could have asked this group to give a real atheistic explanation of objective morality. By the way, just like the beginning of the universe is evidence for a beginner, the existence of a real right and wrong that all of us believe in is evidence for a moral lawgiver. I could have asked him all sorts of questions. Instead, what I said to this atheist group, I said, look, I'm a Christian, and I am interested in persuading people Christianity is true. What are the things that Christians say and do to prevent people from even hearing what we believe is true? Lady in the front, she said, listen. I said, what do you mean? She said, all my Christian friends want to preach to me, tell me I'm wrong, but they don't listen to me. Why should I listen to them when they don't listen to me? That's fair. This fellow in this back, maybe 55, had a website allegedly debunking Christianity. He goes, stop the atheist jokes. I thought, man, dang it, because I've got some good ones. Actually, he said, stop slandering atheists. I said, what do you mean? He goes, look, I will go sit in the back of a church. By the way, I have had multiple atheists tell me they just come and sit in the back of churches and just observe. By the way, if you're an atheist, you don't believe in God, church really is an interesting sociological function. We were sitting in church the other day singing about the blood. If you don't understand Christian theology, either this is a whacked out cult or it's a medical convention. You know how many atheists I've tell me just sit and watch in church? He goes, every time I go to church, there's some cheap shot or an insult against atheists or some non-Christian group. I remember thinking, this guy's got a complex. We're not that bad. I'm telling you, within 2 or 3 weeks, I'm sitting in church, and the pastor tells a joke at the expense of atheists. My wife leans over, grabs my knee. She's like, see, we do it more than we even realize. So believe it or not, the main point of this is to stop and get you to say, do you know what you believe and why? Because here's what I'm convinced about. I'm convinced that Christians get defensive and angry when I do this exercise. Why? Because we as Christians don't know what we believe and why we believe it. If you don't know your beliefs and someone presses you, it's human nature to get defensive. It's only when you've thought through, why do I believe the Bible? Why do I think Jesus rose from the grave? What do I really believe about evolution? That you have the confidence and an ability to engage somebody with patience and love. Friends, you want to make a difference in your generation? You got to know what you believe. You got to know why. That's why Jesus said, love God with your heart and with your soul and with your mind. Now listen, I have 6 minutes left. I'm not going to answer all the questions that came up. You can email me through my site, and I have an assistant who will answer all of your questions or do his best. Let me give you a few quickly, just to give you a sense of how we would do this. Now, for example, I do like your question about contradictions in the Bible up top. Let me just answer those two, okay? First, if you read Genesis 1 carefully, it's given a macro view of all of creation. If you read Genesis 2, it focuses down on day 6. So day 1 is macro, day 2 is micro. Now, according to the days of Genesis, God makes plants and then he makes human beings. Genesis 2 is not focusing on the whole planet, it's focusing on the garden. It says, when there were no plants of the field, God made man. Why? The plants he's talking about are crops that humans cultivate. None of those had been up yet because humans had not been there. So there weren't a certain kind of plant in the garden. That doesn't mean there weren't plants on the planet as a whole. There's no contradiction when you look closely. How about the New Testament? What day Jesus died on? Here's the quick answer. The quick answer is you have to understand the culture in which the Bible was written and their understanding of how time is judged. So, a Jew, the day begins and ends at like sundown. Ours is midnight. That's actually weird if you think about when our day ends and begins. Do you know, to a Jewish mindset, any part of a day is considered a day and a night? Did you know that? You realize we do the same thing with taxes? My neighbor a few years ago was pregnant and she was due January 2nd. I jokingly said, you ought to have a C-section on December 31st. I learned a couple things. Number one, don't joke with pregnant ladies. I was in the hospital room, my wife's giving birth, I was being really funny. She just didn't see it. I learned to just shut up and say, yes, ma'am, and help how I could. Don't joke with pregnant ladies, you're not funny. Second, why did I say that? Because if you have a child who lives 1 day or a minute of a day, you get a tax write-off for the full year. So part of a year counts as the full year. In the way Jews judge time, Friday, part of a day is a day and a night. Saturday, part of a day, full day, day and a night. Sunday, what we call morning to them, chronologically is a day and a night. There's no contradiction when you understand the culture. Second, I'm going to address your question about the soul. Friends, I think there is unbelievable evidence that the soul exists. Let me give you two quick pieces of evidence. Number one, when I said I didn't believe in the soul, what am I doing? I'm saying all that exists is the body. Now, if you are just a physical body, guess what you don't have? You don't have the ability to choose. You don't have free will because physical things are acted on by forces in the environment. There's no self to choose. So you take an apple and you drop it, it will fall because of forces acting on that apple. If there's no soul, you are no different than that apple. You're just a complex machine that is operated on by forces in the environment. You realize what that does? If there is no free will, you can't morally condemn somebody. Love is meaningless. But I think it's obvious we have free will. I know that I have free will as much as I know anything. So if you're just a body, there's no free will. If we do have free will, there at least must be a soul. Second piece of evidence is I think near-death experiences, I have a whole chapter on this, are absolutely captivating. Not just the popular stories in books. There are professional journals that document people who, while their brain has stopped functioning, their heart is not working, they're able to receive information from the environment. One girl who was rushed to a hospital, this is documented in a peer-reviewed journal, I can give you the source. Rushed to a hospital because of a car accident, says, I left my body. There's a man's blue size 10 tennis shoe on the 4th story window with a smudge mark on the side. They go find exactly that shoe. Now, how did she know that? Either she planted it there, got herself to die medically in a car accident and then tell people about it, which makes zero sense, or it matches the hundreds of stories we have. Now, what does that tell us? When your body stops functioning, there is a soul that continues beyond your body. You are body and you are soul. Now, friends, I realize there's some questions that are left answering. Number one, tonight you get to hear from one of my best friends. J. Warner Wallace has been a cold case detective 25 years. Some of you heard him this morning. He set out to disprove that the gospel's not reliable. Through forensic analysis as a cold case detective, he realized it's true and that the best evidence points towards the resurrection. When it's all said and done, friends, the fact of history that matters most is the resurrection of Jesus. If Jesus rose from the grave, Christianity's true. Tonight you get to hear from one of my best friends who I think is an unbelievable presenter on the evidence for the resurrection. So come with an open heart, come with an open mind. She just in front goes like this. I am so pumped that you are pumped. You just made my day. Second, here's what I'm going to do. My website is just seanmcdowell.org. There's articles on there. There's videos on there. There's resources on there to answer these questions that came up, to help you make sense of it, all right? I'm going to sneak to the back, and here's what I did. This is the first year I've done this. I brought some resources that I think might help you out. Specifically, there's 2 in the back that I want to mention. All right, there's 3, but I'm only going to mention 2. One is the book, Is God Just a Human Invention? I got with a friend of mine the 17 biggest objections people raise against God, such as the existence of hell. How can the Bible have slavery? And we answer questions like evidence for the soul, the origin of the universe. Are miracles even possible? So this is the one I wrote. If I could recommend one book to help you go a little bit deeper and answer these questions, it'd be the book Is God Just a Human Invention that's back there. Second, this just came out 2 weeks ago. The Apologetic Study Bible for Students. By the way, apologetics doesn't mean saying you're sorry. It means giving a reason for the hope within. That's what it means. So it's a study Bible, but it's filled with all of these features, including, we got the top 132 questions, almost all the ones you raised, and I got 1-page concise, enjoyable, thoughtful responses to them. It's an amazing resources. The response has been incredible, including my questions on the existence of God, ethics, other religions, etc., including my favorite question. If God made everything, why is it wrong to smoke pot? That's actually a really good question. Now you want an answer to it, don't you? Yeah, you're going to have to pick up a copy. I'll see you in back. Jeff, take it away.